Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Monday, the 18th of March, 2019. 2 days left of winter and then 2 days left, there you go. 2 days left of winter before spring arrives on Thursday. And after that major storm that moved up into the Great Lakes, and then Friday's outbreak of severe weather kept me so busy I really couldn't do any live stream Friday night, but it gave me a few days to catch a breather. It's been a while since we've had a stretch like this where the weather, not just here in the East, but across virtually the entire U.S., with a couple of minor exceptions, is quiet. Now, while the actual weather itself that's going on today is quiet, there are a few notables that we want to bring up front and center. And the first one is the flood advisories that you see up in North Dakota, also into northwestern Minnesota, and throughout parts of Nebraska. There has been record flooding. We discussed this last week about the rapid warm-up over the near-record snow cover that's up in the northern plains, and now all of that is melting very rapidly, and the rivers are flooding, and the Weather Service describes it as historic to catastrophic in nature. So while there is no additional rainfall that is occurring here, the snowmelt from prior, the winter weather systems that impacted the northern plains, and that's also going to extend, by the way, through the Great Lakes region as well. We have to remember that there's also near-record snowfall in many areas in the western Great Lakes and in the upper Midwest. So this is likely to get worse in the coming days. Also, seeing some of that going on in the Northwest, where there has been an exceptional amount of snow. You can see the flood advisories that are up there. And today, Seattle recorded a high of 72 degrees, which is the highest wintertime temperature they have ever that has ever been observed. 72, the highest during any of the winter months. And of course, this is juxtaposed against what happened back in February, where they had a high temperature of 32 on one particular day in February, which I believe was also some sort of a record. But either way, it just shows you how sometimes the balancing and counterbalancing is going on. But when we look at the watches and warnings today, there's very little. A small area of winter weather advisories in in the Sierra Nevadas. We also have freeze warnings up for northern Alabama, northwest Georgia. They're in the growing season now, so you're going to see impacts from chilly air that is driving down through the Northeast and down through the Mid-Atlantic states and into parts of the Southeast. But other than that, that really is it. There are no severe thunderstorms to worry about, and only a very small area that the Storm Prediction Center is even indicating. By the way, severe weather forecasting is the toughest I think of the forecasts that are put out there. And I'll give you, this is by no means a criticism of SPC, but it's Friday. The severe weather that actually developed outside their marginal risk area. It happens sometimes. They had their marginal risk from central New Jersey south, but the severe weather actually formed north and west outside of that marginal risk zone. So it had a lot of people, basically running around like chickens without heads, trying to play catch up, myself included. And also, if you look at today, by the way, no organized severe thunderstorms, and only a small area of thunderstorms being indicated in parts of Arizona, northwest New Mexico, and southwestern Colorado. And the other thing is that today, one of my Patreon members, Wayne Sherman, brought up that today is the anniversary of the 1925 tri-state tornado, which impacted Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. 695 people lost their lives in that tornado. And if you go on YouTube, by the way, there you can actually see original footage from that. I think it's about a 4-minute YouTube video, and it's got some really just fascinating footage, and very sad, of course, the devastation that tornado caused. It was an F5, probably might be on the same order as the Xenia, Ohio tornado, which I believe was back in 1974, if I'm not mistaken. So just take a look at that if you get a chance. It's very, very interesting stuff indeed. Now, going forward for this week, we are going to see much of the action as far as rain is concerned for Central and South Florida. And then as we get toward late this week and over the weekend, we begin to start to see rain expanding across Texas and back through the southern plains and the lower Mississippi Valley, back out through the southwest and along the west coast. So this, this respite here is going to come to an end. The South Florida rains on the order of, in some places, of a couple of inches. This is all going to be happening from tonight right through Wednesday. And that will eventually feed a low that's going to try to move up the East Coast, but just offshore. I'm going to get into that. There's chatter about it, and I've got my own opinions on all of this. But notice that SPC's view is that much of the precip with this, the half-inch more and higher liquids are all offshore, central and eastern Long Island, southeastern New England, and up through Maine. There's not a whole lot that's being indicated further to the west. So, they're usually pretty good about this sort of stuff. And frankly, when I look at the upper air pattern and when I look at what's been happening just all through this winter, you really have to, you're going to have to really make a strong case for something of consequence to happen in the coastal Northeast, with the exception of maybe up in Maine. That's the only, and maybe for eastern New England down to eastern Mass. And even here, by the way, I'm not so sure whether it's going to be, cold enough for snow. It may wind up being mostly rain out of all of this. Now, you look at the satellite loop tonight, and you can see where all the moisture is, excuse me, concentrated in the Gulf states and across Florida. And that's pretty much it. You have a system that is moving offshore today. Please, just as a reminder, this was one where some models, specifically the GFS, was trying to show several inches across southern Pennsylvania and New Jersey, even through yesterday morning, still doing it. And a lot of these areas never saw a flake or an ice pellet. I mean, this wound up being, just a very, very weak system that you could barely find on the radars today. And now it's moving on out to the northeast. But there is going to be a low that's going to come out of this mess that's in the Gulf of Mexico. And for now, much of the rain is confined into the Gulf itself. You're not really seeing all that much with respect to rainfall on land areas. So I'll bring up the U.S. radar here. And there we go. And you can see there's a little patch of rain in South Texas down near Brownsville. And you're starting to see some rain coming on the radar, into radar range off the west coast of Florida and moving eastward. So that is going to be coming in for tonight and tomorrow. Meanwhile, the system in the east, which actually, if you look back at the GFSs from a couple of days ago, had this precip up into southern New England and southeastern New York. Look where it is, folks. It's down in Delmarva, down through Virginia, and into North Carolina. And it makes you wonder about what models are doing for Thursday and Friday, where we may see a similar correction with the lows being a little bit further south and east. There is some support for the idea that that won't be the case, that they'll be a little further north and west. But I still would argue that even if that happens, it just means that we get rainfall that's enhanced for a few hours or more and then out. I just don't see anything coming of this, because there really isn't going to be any cold air around after today, in my view. There will be cold air coming in on Friday, but the low will be long gone. In the west, some scattered precip showing up in parts of Arizona and New Mexico, so that's part of that thunderstorm risk area, and also into West Texas. And you're seeing a little bit of precip up moving into North Dakota, and that's just about it. The surface map tonight, you have a weak low. It's sitting in eastern North Carolina, well south of where models had it a few days ago. You got weak high pressure, temperatures up in the 40s, all the way up into northern Minnesota and in through parts of Wisconsin. A little bit colder in the Dakotas, but it's above freezing there. So again, snowmelt here, big time, especially down in Nebraska. Remember, some of these areas just had the blizzard from last week. Meanwhile, out in the west, we really don't have any crashing low coming into the coast. It's pretty quiet, 50s and 60s up and down. You've got a low way offshore, but the west is in a bit of a ridge position right now, so we're not anticipating any issues there. Just going to really quick bring up the Storm Prediction Center's forecast map. I just want to show you that at least for the next 3 days, it's a little hard to see, but if you look down near the bottom left, you'll see the each day forecast here, and it's got no severe, no severe, no severe, and there's what the map actually looks like. They do have, this is on day three. So let's look at day 2, which is now I just jumped out to day 1. No, I'm sorry, day 2. So this is the day 2 forecast, which is from Tuesday, that's tomorrow, into Wednesday morning. Tomorrow morning into Wednesday morning. Just a small area of storms in southern Colorado, northern New Mexico, and a small area of storms coming into southern California. And that's it. Very, very quiet. It's amazing how that major storm just took a lot of the zap out of the atmosphere temporarily. And now, at least for this week, the severe weather's calming down. It's not going to stay like that forever. So let's take a look at what's happening in the east going forward. Now, we are seeing, this you can barely find it. It just moves out, this area of precip. And high moves in. There's your rain in Florida. Low there up in northwest of Cuba. Rolls across the Keys. Part of that low is going to go out, and you're going to have this leftover frontal boundary still sitting there. So there's likely to be some rain or showers around even on Wednesday in Florida. But now we have this high in the east moving out, and here comes the next cold front. Now, what the models seem to be doing is that there's a short wave. There are a couple of short waves running around, and a new low forms off the South Carolina coast. You can see the isobar there kind of looks like a finger pointing up. That low is going to wait for the short wave in the northern stream, the cold front, to kind of pick it up and then kick it out to the northeast, where it starts to strengthen as it moves up into New Brunswick and pulls down some colder air for Friday. You'll notice that the precip, at least indicated by the GFS, is rain. There's not really a whole lot of cold air with this, and if you take a look at up near the Great Lakes, there's your cold air. There's another shortwave trough that's coming down here. See, the issue is going to be a matter of phasing, and it just seems to me that considering the fact that we haven't seen anything successfully phase through the whole winter in bringing up a low up the East Coast, I just wonder whether that's going. Why is it going to happen now? I don't know. But even if it does, it really doesn't. It really doesn't do very much, other than the fact that you have a low that runs out northeastward as a cold front is moving through, and that's it. There's no explosive deepening. You don't have this upper low that's going to be diving down and cutting it off and getting cold air here involved. These systems all stay basically separate, and the low moves out to the northeast. And I'm going to illustrate this on North America view to show you. Now, this is Wednesday night as this whole thing is setting up. So you have 3 shortwave troughs here. You have one in the north. I've got that as number 1. That's the one over the Great Lakes. You've got a second shortwave trough that is moving across the southern stream. And then you have a third shortwave trough between Great Slave Lake and Lake Winnipeg in Canada. That's the one that I have labeled Diver and Punter. You have an upper ridge that runs from West Texas up the Rockies into the Pacific Northwest, and an upper low negatively tilted trough from Northern California down into Southern California and into Arizona. So that, you know, kind of pins the ridge up in a southeast northwest fashion. But in the east, you've got these three short waves running around, and it's hard for me to really envision a way that this becomes anything other than what's being shown by the models. And the NAM being the most aggressive one in all of this is, to me, highly suspect at this point. It really wants to wrap this upper low in the southern stream and cuts it off here. And then you've got this second short wave that is behind it. I have it here on the paint box. So, you know, here's the NAM, really gets very vigorous with this particular system right there, okay? Even though it is as vigorous as it is, the NAM is still having some trouble generating, you know, any kind of cold air. I mean, this would be, at best you would have as an argument to say that maybe you could get some dynamic cooling the atmosphere from the top down because of vertical motion. In other words, there's a lot of lift in the atmosphere. You can lift a parcel of air up. The air is unstable. You wind up with that with a gradual cooling that occurs from the top down. And then you've got this short wave here, this separate short wave that is swinging around across the Great Lakes. This to me seems, you know, pretty overdone. This short wave that's in the Great Lakes should kick this out, you know, fairly quickly to the northeast. I think the NAM is just having a bit of trouble digesting all of this. And I want to get the GFS's view. The European is about the same as the GFS with respect to, you know, how it comes out with the upper air. But I'll bring up the GFS for Thursday night. And hang on, just going to go back to the paint box here. We'll get rid of this, and we'll bring the GFS on the tight view here on the paint box. So here's the GFS's view of it. Doesn't have that, you know, wrapped up vigorous look that the NAM has. You've got a short wave here. It actually kind of splits them a little bit. It looks like there's a second short wave back through Virginia, North Carolina. There's one up through upstate New York, and then you have this one. This is that diver kicker one that I was talking about, and that's still well separate from the main features. And here it is by Friday morning on the GFS. Again, much different than what the NAM has. I just think that the NAM's idea of that wrapped up cutoff like that is just it's too much for me to believe at this point. But here's your diver kicker here. That part of the trough strengthens, and by now, by Friday morning, this thing is long gone out to the northeast. So in the end, for Friday, you wind up with a lot of instability clouds and snow shower activity. In fact, on Friday, I think there could be a pretty decent lake effect event that will occur in upstate New York, and also some snows up in northeastern New York and northern New England on the backside of whatever low that develops along the coast. So I'm just not really overly enthused by all of this. You know, I made the proclamation late last week that I thought from the standpoint of the old saying of the fat lady has sung. I think from the opera isn't over until the fat lady sings. Well, you know, she has, I believe, sung at this point. We'll take you through the whole model run here. Okay, where are you? Okay, so there you go. Just a little slow on the uptake here. So let's go back to the surface map, and we'll show you what's happening. Now, we're entering into spring, And that means, by the way, that we don't necessarily flip switches in weather and turn seasons off and turn seasons on. There are periods of transition that occur. So when I say the idea of winter is over, what I'm saying is that if you're looking for if you're looking for the possibility of something really substantial to occur, and for many areas it would be more substantial than anything that occurred during the winter months, I really believe that is not going to be the case. Could we have some weak systems that bring in the early spring snows that often you see it with big flakes, that kind of thing? Maybe some areas wind up getting a light accumulation. Of course, that's always possible. Might there be an opportunity for something a bit more substantial, say in upstate New York or up in through central and northern New England? Yeah, I think it's possible, but you're going to have everything just right and your ducks in a row, and I think you're going to have to do it with very little, if no blocking at all, because those signals just aren't there. So here's our surface map going forward for the rest of this week. You start to see stuff coming into the west, by the way. We are going to start to see a gradual return to some activity here as we go into the weekend. In the east, after Thursday, the low goes by Thursday night into Friday. Now, the one place where I think that there might be something substantial out of this could be in central and northern Maine. So that's something that we're going to have to watch. But in the east for Friday, it's cold. You can see the blue shadings up in upstate New York and in parts of northern and western Pennsylvania as we go into later Saturday into Saturday evening. Those are snow showers and backside snows from the low up in New Brunswick. You're starting to get some rain coming into the southern plains on Saturday as low pressure begins to push out to the east, slowly but surely. Meanwhile, here in the east, we can warm up nicely on Sunday with a west wind. If we have enough sunshine, I think we could see temperatures rise into the 60s, and we've got west-northwest isobars, so that would keep the sea breeze out too, even for coastal areas, which would be a welcome change. And then going into next week, it looks like we're going to get into some rainfall here later next Tuesday. Now, whether it winds up looking like this or not, the GFS is a system suppressed pretty far to the south because it brings this chilly high down up into the Great Lakes. But again, look how everything just winds up shooting up to the east. It doesn't climb northward. So, this whole idea, the whole winter, we've seen a lot of instances with these lows in the Atlantic that keep getting pushed out to the east because of the state of the Atlantic jet stream. That continues going in through the last week of March and into the first days of April. You see the model kicking out several weather systems. And there still could be some cold shots coming down. The early spring is known sometimes for shots of cold air. Again, we don't necessarily flip switches here, but I'm still thinking that once we get past the beginning of the last days of March and we start to get into April, we're going to see more of a trough in the west, and you see that evolve, and more of a ridge in the east. And that brings rain also up into the plains in Ohio Valley. Of course, obviously, a lot's going to change on the long range, the actual surface maps, but I do believe that toward the last days of the month, you're going to get this trough to pull out. Here's how the upper air looks. So here's your first system for later next week. That trough pulls out, little ridge builds in. You get another trough dropping down from the north. See, the big problem here is the trough position in the east right now. In spite of the fact that you've got this PNA, this Pacific North America Index, so strongly positive, the problem is that the trough in the east is too far east. It needs to be more back toward 80 or 85 degrees west for it to cause some serious issues here, and it's not. It's more along the lines of 75 west or even east of there. And that trough eventually does pull out to some degree, although there's another arm that rotates around it early next week. So it keeps it cold for a few extra days. And then finally, once the last trough swings through here around the 29th, 30th of March, up come the heights in the east, deeper trough back in the west, and this should start a process, I think, of a warming trend as we get into the month of April. Just that I think that temperatures maybe will be above average in the east more often than not, and below average in the west more often than not in the longer haul. So, with the absence of any big storms around at the moment, we can enjoy the relative quiet and calm. Again, to emphasize that what is going on up in parts of the plains is the result of the warming now, temperatures going above freezing in an area that's been bitter cold for many weeks with record snow cover in a lot of areas. Record snowfalls during the latter part of January and into February, and now that snow has to melt, and you've got rivers that have flooded considerably in Nebraska in particular. If you watch any of the videos that have been coming out of there, the flooding has been insane. Folks losing their homes, animals being found in farmland, having to be pulled out of flooded grounds. So it's a really, really difficult situation that has developed for that particular part of the country. All right, I'm on the chat board with you guys. Nice to see you all on board here. Do I have any idea, asks Anthony Orr, about with the parallel GFS? The parallel GFS has huge problems. The Weather Service was supposed to launch it in 2 days, and of course we found out a few weeks ago that has been delayed, and that is actually been delayed at least till the middle part of August. They've got a lot of repair work to do on that particular model. It is not doing. It is not good. Peter Bicker, you want to see the euro? Let's take a look. I did look at the euro today. I really didn't see too much of a difference between the euro and the other models, but I'm always here to oblige. So let's look at the Europeans upper air. Now remember, this only goes out to day 10, and we know that the models have had a real difficult time, particularly the European here. But the Europeans got the same idea. The lead short wave into the lakes, another short wave on the southern end of it, and then the third short wave that swings around in the north. But you can see where the Europeans got it kind of phased out near 75, and then it wraps it up as it moves towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Of course, we're looking at this in 24-hour jumps. Ridge comes into the east over the weekend and into next week. Now, interestingly, the European rotates the trough that is over Labrador further north and east than the GFS does. So the GFS wants to have a stronger arm coming into the eastern United States next week, where the Europeans got something much flatter. So that's something we'll have to pay attention to see which model has a stronger handle on this. You start to see the trough coming into the west toward the end of the period here. This is March 28th, so this is day 10 on the European. But you see how the eastern trough is getting ready to just basically lift up and out in another day or two, and the troughing in the west, you can almost envision it coming into the west. And as far as what the European does, not having the precip maps to look at, but we can look at least, and it does with the surface lows here. See, now there's your low on Thursday, sitting off the Virginia coast. And that's Wednesday morning, I'm sorry. And you look at the surface and you'd think that this was a snow surface, but in reality there's not a whole lot of cold air here at all. Most of the cold air is well up to the north. There's your surface low off the Delaware coast Thursday morning, and I'm sorry, let me start that again, because now I left over from the last system, so it just didn't look right. So here's tomorrow with that high. The high goes out. There's no real cold air here in the east. And now you've got this surface low Thursday morning that's sitting over Cape Hatteras. There's a cold front with the northern part of the northern stream, which I think is going to ultimately dominate here. The northern stream cold front is moving into eastern Ohio, western New York, and northwest Pennsylvania. So it wraps up a deep low southeast of Cape Cod, a 978 low. I don't know. I'm just kind of highly suspect on it right now with that. This certainly would suggest that this could be, if this were correct, that you'd wind up with a sizable snowfall over interior, northern New England, on up maybe northwestern New England, northeastern New York, on up into central and northern Maine. I just don't think there's enough cold air here to support anything more than that, and I don't necessarily accept the idea that we're going to drop 30 millibars in 24 hours from the low that's sitting off of North Carolina, and then it winds up to the east-southeast of Cape Cod by Friday morning. It will, either way, it will get somewhat windy here later Thursday night and Friday as a low does move up there. I just think that that's way is way overdone, and you got to at least suspect. Oops, I had the wrong. Sorry about that. Let me just bring the window back up. Hang on, folks. Pulled the wrong one. I'll show you the European again. I'm off 3 days. I'm a little slow on the uptake. What can I tell you? But so here's the European surface map, and that high for tomorrow slides out east of Virginia and south of Cape Cod. So that's not good in order to try to pin cold air into the east. So you really would need to do it all with dynamics. I just don't know where you're going to that you're going to deepen this low from 1007 from off the near the North Carolina coast on Thursday. I think it may wind up being further out, by the way, but we'll see. And then all of a sudden you've got this 978 low on the European sitting southeast of Cape Cod. Just as a comparison, there's the GFS with a 991, much weaker low to the northeast of Cape Cod for the same time frame. In a season where we haven't seen deep lows at all moving up the East Coast like this, why would this happen now? That's my big problem with all of this. And of course you've got the Canadian, which doesn't seem to really know what it wants to do, with a low way out, a 977 low at 37 and about 69, which really wouldn't amount to anything here more than some clouds and wind, and that's about it. And then the low winds up deepening to a 958 low over Nova Scotia. Again, why would this happen now? It's hard for me to fathom. And by the way, look at the fact that when you look at the Canadian, as deep as that low gets that's offshore, it produces very little in the way of precip over our neck of the woods. From northeastern Virginia down into southern New England, there's very little that comes out of this. The real wrapped up support doesn't get involved when that northern stream shortwave finally gets involved and the low gets really wrapped up, is when it's approaching Nova Scotia on this model. And you folks there, if this is correct, you'll wind up getting a pretty strong gale center that impacts you. But I am just highly skeptical of seeing well-developed systems at this point. You have to prove it to me, because of the fact that all winter long the signature has been for these things not to happen. And why should they just suddenly? Why they should this should suddenly be different is something that you're going to have to prove to me. If I'm right, we're going to go see models back off in the next couple of runs. Plus, it's Monday. I would think that models are still going to be moving things around well into tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow night we'll start to get a pretty good idea of where this is all going to settle. But right now, I think we're in the area of model noise, and you're seeing quite a bit of it on the models today. Brandon Doherty, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it. Yeah, the 958 low, Peter, I think is out of control. Scott Briller talking about Caribou, Maine, with 75 days where there's been at least a foot of snow on the ground in response to Amy Hogan. Yes, they did break all records up there in Caribou, absolutely. Christopher Chevchik, I did catch it, obviously. I did fix it. Lewis Heck Jr., nice to see you on board. I did see someone new. Johnny Quest, I saw you that you're having rotator cuff surgery tomorrow, so good luck with that. I'm sure everything's going to be absolutely fine with you. Where was it? We had a new person here I wanted to say hi to. Wayne S. Winter is over for New York City. Pretty much so. I agree with that. This was last year. It'd be a whole different story. Last year we had that block sitting here. Bill Gallagher. Was it Bill Gallagher who might be new on the board? I try to keep track of all these things, but it is difficult. I have to start writing stuff down. My memory is not quite what it used to be. Let's see. Okay. By the way, I did put up a post on Patreon. One of the yesterday, one of the frustrating things is, especially in lieu of everything that's been going on over the last few days, with regards to these models throwing all sorts of different snow map solutions that wind up appearing on the internet by folks portraying them as absolutes. And one of the frustrating things about it is that, considering the way the winter has gone and all the different examples that we have had of models creating fantasy snowstorms, and I just put the question out there, have you learned anything? Have you learned anything about what is the function of snow maps and how they're supposed to be used and not to be used? And when you're using them as forecasts, even though you may say you're not, you are. But when you really are. So when you put them out there and you use them as forecasts, you're doing it because you're trying to get attention, and it's very, very frustrating because people latch onto it, and you're not doing weather. You're not forecasting, okay? That's not how you do it. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about how I think you might want to try to do it. I have my own opinions on it. They're not absolute, but all you're really doing is just creating a lot of mass confusion, and it all winds up blowing back to other people, and it's very, very frustrating. Drama casting. Jason Barry, that is a very good word. That's a very good phrase. If I have your permission, I would like to use that because that's exactly what it is. It's drama casting, especially in lieu of the fact that people have now an almost non-existent threshold when it comes to snow of any kind, and it's particularly annoying because we should be adult enough to understand that a few inches of snow should not be a big deal. You start to get up, above half a foot, okay, then maybe it becomes problematic. But come on, it has gotten a bit ridiculous, and thankfully we're more toward the end of the season than with not much, if anything, left at all for this year. I haven't done any fishing yet, Brandon. I'm waiting for the first warm day because it's just too cold at least for me. I don't like standing out in the cold for too long. After about a half an hour, my hands are so cold that I can't even cast. So I'd rather just wait till we get a first good warm day, and then I will be out there. David Schwartz. Actually, I don't have anything on the table. I did have something for early June in Mamaroneck, but in Westchester County, but that just fell through today. So I'll be I'm going to see if any other libraries contact me. If I set something up, I certainly will let everybody know about it. All right, so look, let's go to wrap it up here at this point for tonight. Thanks for being here on this Monday. I have to see if my colleague Joe Rea wants to do a Joe and Joe show on Facebook tonight. If we do, it'll be at 9:25, but no guarantees. There's a lot of stuff going on today, so it's pulling our schedules in different directions. So we'll see if you wind up seeing us, that's fine. But I just can't promise it at this point. And I'll be back to normal live streaming this week, so we'll see you tomorrow at about 7:30. Extra posts are on my Patreon platform. There's a link to that on the descriptor to this live stream or the descriptor to this video. If you're watching it on a replay, you're welcome to join. It's just $2 a month, and it grows a long way to support what I'm doing and gets me a couple of cigars, which makes me a very happy camper. And if you haven't, download my app on Google Play or from the App Store. Just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. The app is free, and you can use it pretty much anywhere, even though what I produce is primarily for the area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, but you can use it to get your local forecast and in your particular area by just putting in your location, and there's a Zoom radar feature on it as well. And that, as I said, the app is free, so you're welcome to download it from the App Store, from Google Play. Just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.